Chains. Love them or hate them, they're everywhere in the works of Project Moon. They're so omnipresent, in fact, that they link the world together, binding it in a clinking mass of symbolic metaphor that no, I will not stop torturing. They're tied to at least 2 of the 5 fingers. They're present at the end of Lobotomy Corporation around the Ja'a thing. They're present in dialogue, too. Even in Limbus, they're present when pulling for new IDs. There are more and more instances of them the deeper you dig. If it's not chains, it's something similar, usually some kind of bindy, ropey thing. And that brings me to the reason we're here. Chains are something that connects one thing to another. Yeah, I know. I'm a genius. Or an idiot. At this point, I'm half mad, and I'll leave that to you, but I'm also not wrong. As a common symbol of binding and connection, chains are pretty consistent throughout history. The Project Moon games are very much about those connections, especially the second one. It started as far back as Lobotomy Corporation, and in a way, it's even present in the Kabbalic Tree of Life. I'm sure you all know so well. Chains are omnipresent because connections are omnipresent. It makes them an No! This cannot be another archetype video. Oh, it's so much worse than that. I've been deep in this universe for a while, enough to take some things away from the basics of storytelling. One of those lessons is that some archetypal themes are a lot more common than others. I call these themes universals. And chains, and the theme they stand in for, are one of those universals. Other examples are themes like hope and human suffering, the trauma that I know so many gacha players love. If this is starting to sound a little familiar, you may be familiar with the Chainsaw Man story, which is built off this exact idea. In Chainsaw Man, the antagonistic devils each represent the fear of a basic concept of human existence. These can be as basic as tomatoes or blood, or as existential as eternity, the future, or darkness. The more inescapable the concept is, the stronger the devil tends to be. This is mirrored in the Project Moon universe, but not one-to-one. Abnormalities tend to be complex and specific. The archetypes they represent are basic, but the stronger ones are those universals. Things like cults, no one is immune to propaganda. Religion, even atheists have faith in something. And identity, if we can't find our own, we wear someone else's. Goodbye. And then we get back to chains. There isn't a chains or connections abnormality, because even to Project Moon, it's just too omnipresent. So instead, we see it suffusing everything. It's the archetype that is so inescapable that we cannot simplify it down to a single form. Doing so would break the links to the rest of the universe, rendering the symbolic gesture moot. So, instead, it's everywhere, but not always the same. What I find interesting about the chains in Project Moon specifically is that they mean different things depending on the context they're used in. What they are connected to changes how we see them. Let's take a look at 2 of the head syndicates of the city and how they both use the chains in different ways. The first syndicate is the Middle, which, in universe, has themes of family and loyalty. Even if you weren't part of the Middle to begin with, the moment you're in, you're treated as family. And family bonds are unbreakable. In this case, the chains of the Middle are worn as necklaces and weapons wrapped around fists. The Middle literally wields its connections to each other as a weapon, and they do so proudly. The chains are casual, comfortable, but no less unbreakable. They are the strongest things in each member's personal universe, just as their loyalty is expected to be. It's through their connection to the family that they use that strength. And at this point, I'm repeating myself. The second syndicate is the Index, which, look, there's no way around it. If you care about major spoilers for Library of Ruina, you can, I guess, go to here. I can't talk about how this group uses chains without spoiling their central premise. Are they gone? Good. Let's talk about how the Index uses chains. In Ruina, nearly every major attack the Index uses has some sort of chain link. More specifically, that theme of binding and unlocking is present, with one of the most basic attacks even being unlocked. Here, the chains aren't on full display. They're usually hidden. But, again, they're always present. The most egregious of this is with the proxy Gloria, who uses weapons attached to chains to attack her enemies. She hides those blades underneath her cloak, only bringing them out when she's fully unlocked. Here, we see how the Index views the chains. For them, they don't need to flaunt them. They don't use them out of pride, but because they're a useful tool. And because they were always bound to you regardless. The Index is built on something called the will of the city, which is itself built off the movements and vibrations of the entire city. These vibrations are interpreted as prophecies. Prescripts are what they call them. And the prescripts are at least somewhat omniscient. Even a failed prescript is predicted and intended because the will of the city cannot be wrong, only misinterpreted. Here, we're back to what the Index chains represent. Fate. It's why they don't treat them as special. Fate is inescapable, unchangeable, universal, and as always, unbreakable. The locks on the chains symbolize how binding they are. At least for the middle, they can put the chains aside, even if they remain bound. The Index, on the other hand, were never unbound to begin with. The way they tie their chains to weapons even indicates that their primary method of interacting with the world, violence, is predestined. Their connections to others can only be made through injury or death, something that's continually reinforced through their prescripts. I know I'm belaboring my point. Two words come up more than any other here: binding and unbreakable. This is the bulk of Project Moon's obsession with chains, and it's where this tiny madness blossoms from. Whenever I see either of these words, I think of them. Chains aren't just present where we see them, they're also present in places we can't. They show up in dialogue, and extending the metaphor allows us to see the strings everywhere. References to chains are a glimpse at the inner workings of the machine. Chains are often used as a symbol of oppression and slavery. Their unbreakability is what makes them unique from threads or other means of binding. By chaining someone or something, it's a guarantee that they cannot be removed. It's a removal of free will. Very few people will allow themselves to be chained willingly. The greatest action we have as a sentient being is the ability to choose. Angela was chained for a long time, but she was able to break those chains after a monumental effort, and in doing so, she hurt others. There are many ways to sever ties, many types of bridges to burn. They can be made without your consent or made without your knowledge. Breaking is easier than making, and chains in particular take a long, long time to make well. Project Moon makes sure we understand, without a doubt, that a chain can be broken. Doing so is difficult, and doing it incorrectly will almost always hurt others. But they are still worth breaking. In most cases, chains are bound to others who will feel the strangling pull as you try to break away. In cases like these, it's better to find a way to move the collective. Don't choke your fellows just for your sake. Find who or what bound you, and together, as one, locate the key. If the key no longer exists, well, there are other tools for breaking chains. With enough effort and force, nothing is unbreakable for long. Humanity is, by definition, a collection of individuals with shared traits. Individuals cannot exist if they aren't linked to others in some way. Even by being an individual, they're defining themselves as not a part of the collective. The chains are still present, even if they're less visible. Even a negative connection requires a start and end point. These are the chains of identity, and they should not be broken. Severing all chains, all bonds, all ties would irreparably damage ourself. We must consider carefully before we break something. What do we lose from that link? I think I've made my point. That obsession? It's just the nature of our world. The world of relationships, connections, identity, and humanity. The world of the universal chain links that tie us all together. That is why Project Moon is obsessed with chains. Wouldn't you be too?